the 29th from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. approximately. And this is happening at the Vernon Branch Library in South Central. So feel free to help yourselves to a flyer. They will be right here. And if in case you want to be a part of the next series of the Comics que Curan workshops, I have the flyer here that has all of the information for the next series. Abraham, along with Javier, will be teaching again how to write a 2-page comic, how to write and draw a 2-page comic that will get published as volume 2 of the Comics que Curan series. And the sessions will be this time on Saturdays, and it'll be open to everyone. So this will be for ages 14 and older. So if you have any young adults that would like to be a part of this workshop along with you, you're more than welcome to bring them. Space is limited, and it's Saturdays from beginning March 7th all the way through to May 2nd. So it is going to be every week. Just something to keep in mind. And it'll be beginning from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. So if you want to come spend your Saturday mornings with Abraham, Javier, and me, you're more than welcome to. The last things are Caro's release party. So Caro's chapbook is now being shipped out. She's over here signing a couple of copies. Yeah. Congratulations, Caro. Officially, her book is being released on the 29th. So all of the orders that are being done right now, they're pre-orders. They're like, just building up to the excitement. And the price will go up beginning on Saturday. So if you want to order a pre-ordered copy, you're still welcome to do that through the website. But the release party that we're able to provide at Avenue 50 Studios happening next Friday, March 6th from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. This is at Avenue 50 Studio in Highland Park. So feel free to help yourselves to a flyer. There's going to be other poets there, including Nikolai, who's also one of the poets that we published last year through the mentorship program. It's going to be a fun night. You'll get to hear Caro express all of her love for herself now. And then on Saturday, March 7th, at 7 p.m. is the showcase for Helene, our poet artist in residence at the Techno Latinx site. She has finished her project. It's a virtual reality project. It's sounding like it's going to be a really cool experience. So if you are available that night, it's again Saturday, March 7th from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. We're hosting it inside of a small gallery space in the Fashion District in downtown. So it'll be a really cool experience to come and walk through the planet that she created digitally. All the flyers are there. If you have any questions, definitely let me know. It's just going to be a very busy next couple of weeks. So definitely hang in there if I'm not getting back to you guys quickly. Yes, Rocky?
I had a question regarding the comic book writing class.
Yeah.
Will that one have
the contest aspect?
Yes. Okay.
No, not just. Yeah.
It's already a great program, but I just thought if it had that was worth bragging about as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that was a very specific thing that the Department of Mental Health asked for. But no, this time there's no contest aspect to the Comics que Curan workshop, which I have my own doubts about it from the beginning. Yeah, but this one's going to be open to everybody. Everybody will get published. Nobody will feel the pressure, trying to win a contest. Because it's not a contest. Art is not a contest. But good question, Roque. Thanks for asking.
Not to bum it out. It is a spectacular class regardless of the content.
Yeah, you guys should really see the copies of the comic. Honestly, I don't think the Department of Mental Health is going to do as good of a job printing as the job that we did. So if you get a copy, you'll get the first edition ones. Which are really nice. They look nice, in my opinion. Ojalá que nos acompañen estos días. The only other announcement that I have is that next week I'm not going to be here. I'll be up in Sacramento reviewing grants as part of the California Arts Council's grant review panels. But Abraham is going to be here and he's going to have a lesson for you guys. So, yeah, watch out. Yeah, a little bit. No, but you guys will have fun, I hope. And I'll try to give as much time for you guys when we come back to make sure that your work is ready. So when I come back the week after, it's going to be a workshop day. Ese día pueden traer su trabajo que han estado escribiendo durante estas últimas semanas y así van a poder compartir entre ustedes y recibir notas. So just know or be aware, right, that Tuesday, 2 weeks from today, it's going to be a workshop day. So come prepared and bring some extra copies of your writing, and hopefully you'll get some good notes from everyone. I very much appreciate the feedback that you guys gave me. It definitely was taking mental notes last week, and I'm definitely gonna incorporate some of your feedback. So I appreciate that. Yeah. So, ¿hay alguna pregunta? Any questions?
That workshop, you said 2 weeks from now or something like this?
Yeah, workshop
That's
day.
for the final entry?
It's not for the final, no, but it's, you know, your chance to get caught up if you haven't been able to keep up. But it's also a day that you'll be able to use to, you know, either conference with me or get feedback from everyone else. Yeah. All right.
We've been,
Oh, we've been recording
all,
so
yeah.
far? All right.
It's a promotion there.
All promotion.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, aquí les tengo la cita de hoy. And I guess just like a little disclaimer, I guess I'd call it. This particular poet, so I discovered him on Twitter. Somebody posted this on Twitter. And when I tried to find more information about him, I actually couldn't. So I don't know if he, like how active he is currently, how new he is, but he does apparently have other books out, not just the one that this particular phrase came from. Y me parece que es español, so that's why I put poet Spanish down here. But I might be wrong, so just like a little, like I say, disclaimer, right? But I did think what he wrote was pretty cool. And it definitely relates to today's lesson, at least the theme of what we'll be discussing today. So he wrote, en el español, algunos días somos cementerios, otros días somos museos. And I translated it for us to say, some days we are cemeteries, other days we are museums. What do you guys think about our quote from Ron Israel?
That's deep.
It's deep?
Yeah. I like it.
What makes it deep for you?
Well, first, obviously it's my opinion, but
Hmm?
we could be cemeteries because, like, in my personal philosophy, like, we can die so many times and we can still carry those parts of us within us.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they can hold us down, but on other days where we look back on how much we've grown, that's the museum, it's the art.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I like it.
I like that. Mal? And then Rod.
Just to piggyback off of what Samantha said,
Yeah.
there are things in our lives that we don't want to reach the surface. We kind of keep those underground, and there are things that we're proud of,
Yeah.
and that would be what the museum holds.
I like that. Yeah.
I definitely vibe with that.
Radu?
Well, to my shame, when I saw that quote, I remember my mom. Both my friends passed away, and when my mom died, we were visiting her to the cemetery maybe like every week or something like that. And over time, we stopped doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a ground, an open. I mean, not in a building, a grave.
Yeah.
And over time, the grass grew up, and you can even distinguish the ground,
The
grave
plot.
from the environment. So, and then museums, you have museums when you want someone or something to be remembered.
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes you want cemeteries when you don't want stuff to be remembered. Just put them in the ground and that's it. Forget about them.
Right.
I think it's really cultural. Well, in my perspective, since I'm Mexican, cemeteries are also a place that you want to go and visit. It reminds me of this movie that I watched. It was Nor Dog, Nor Wolf, I think. It was a Native American movie. And the guy that goes to a museum, this little museum in like one of those old towns in the States, right? And he says, he sees this stuff in there, and he said, like, it's funny how white people pay $5 to get in a place where my dead ancestors are here, like, because it's the same thing. You come to think about it, like old people's stuff, or their own stuff.
Yeah, it's a good observation for sure. I think one of my ways of trying to interpret this was to also think about, well, what is the function of each one, right? What is a cemetery for?
Dead bodies.
Dead bodies. Gravestones.
Decomposition.
Memorial. That's a good one.
Mausoleum. Resting.
Resting. Right. Basically the end, right? Kind of like the place where the end happens, or where the end, things end, right? Things stop.
A Luis, yo lo relacioné con mi estado de ánimo cuando entré.
Ajá.
Es que él
Sí.
estaba escribiendo y yo me sentía muy mal. No sé si saludé, entré y me senté aquí y le digo, oh, me siento como un cementerio, ¿verdad? Después ya me paré, caminé, fui a vi las fotos, mi estado de ánimo empezó a cambiar y tomé fotos y lo relacioné también con usted. Y después llegó el chocolate y ya cambié. Pero fue muy curioso lo que pasó.
Sí,
Y así
sí.
lo relaciono.
También así puede ser, ¿verdad? Puede ser también un estado de ánimo. Algunos días somos cementerios. Kind of like what Mauricio was saying. There's moments where we have things that we just don't want to revisit. Right? We all carry inside of us memories that hurt sometimes, and so we'd rather not revisit them. Que quede donde quede, you know. There are other things though that we're proud of, that we're okay with showing off, that you know, we might think about as part of our personal museum. So that being said, ¿cuál es el propósito de un museo? What is the function of a museum?
Continuity of like legacy and history.
Yeah. Continuity is a great word. Legacy. I would say that that's probably the main reason why we have museums, right? Because someone, somewhere, decided that that particular object is somehow indicative of our legacy as humans. Whether that be to preserve our culture, to preserve our history, to preserve some kind of, I don't know, tradition, perhaps. Right? But it's about preservation. You know?
I was gonna say preservation too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's sort of the function of it, right? There's also something else, too. A lot of times when we think of museums, we think about how they teach us, right? So it's meant to teach and pass on knowledge, culture, and history. Yes,
I was
sir?
also thinking about the Auschwitz Museum. I went visit there and remembrance and not. So it's legacy stuff that you it's nice to follow, and then other things. I don't know like an English word that would be the anti of legacy. So what stuff that we don't want to do in the future.
Yeah, like a preventative.
Because that one is also a museum. They use the buildings for that we used to be camps, torture chambers, and they have them in a museum.
Yeah, I think that that's still legacy, right? That's still a form of legacy. It might not be the pretty side of our legacy as humans, but it's still a legacy, ¿no? Entonces, si algunos días somos cementerios, el lugar a donde las cosas llegan a su fin, otros días somos museos, somos las cosas que queremos preservar. o que queremos continuar como un tipo de legado. That really got me thinking a lot about the human journey, right? When we've talked about the human journey and how we fit into history and all of that other stuff, it really, for me, the quote started to get me think about the phrase that I have been bringing up the last couple of weeks. You guys remember what that phrase is? The one that I learned when I was in middle school?
Continuity.
Yes.
And change.
And change, right. Continuity and change. So, when we're talking about the larger scope of things, right, that macro worldview, we're talking about history and how history can change, right? Things can evolve, people evolve, ideas evolve, but a lot of times they also stay the same. I think one of the things that, at least for us in our community here, we would probably look at things like, the way that stories get told about us. Hace rato, cuando llegó Roque, nos estuvo platicando sobre un nuevo programa que salió en Netflix. For anybody that's seen it already, I haven't seen it yet, but Roque was talking about Gentified. And Gentified, from the little bit that I know about it, is about basically people that live in Boyle Heights, right? Something like that. And Roque was saying that his impressions of the show were impressions that a lot of people had about just what it means to live in Boyle Heights, and not necessarily in a positive way. It's kind of like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Roque, but it sort of sounded like, it was perpetuating a stereotype of what it means to be Latino, specifically living in Boyle Heights, living a specific kind of experience, but not necessarily done in a careful way. Am I right or wrong?
Yes.
Yeah. And so when we started talking about that, Roque was pondering, well, how does that not happen? Well, my idea of how that would not happen is to show the humanity of the people, right? And we then got on the topic of like drawing the image of a cholo, for example. If you draw a cholo just standing on the side on a corner of a liquor store or something like that, what you'll see is just another gang member, right? But if you take that same gang member and you place them in a different context, if you change the way that we're approaching that cholo and say he's pushing his daughter on a swing, we no longer see a cholo, we see a father. Might be the same exact person, might be dressed exactly the same, but that change in context is how we can change our ideas. But as long as we're in art, right, portraying the same image over and over again, we're always going to have this same sort of cycle of, stereotyping, of, Chicano only images of what it means to be Latino, and we get stuck, right? We can no longer move past that. In history, we see examples of that all the time, if you ask me. Right? Does anybody have any questions or comments so far where we're going with this? How does continuity and change relate to you?
When Nelly mentioned that we get stuck, it brings back to my head like in like art walks and stuff like that, where you see everything's just like Frida Kahlo. Like there was like a point where like, okay, this historic person that showed like empowerment, just kind of became like very, I guess, cliche. And then it came to a point where it kind of lost its value.
Yeah.
It was just kind of like something that everybody used, and it was And you see that a lot, like in like Latino art shops, and it does seem like, yeah, like you could get stuck in that kind of those ideas and that kind of style, which is there's nothing bad about it. But now you mention it, like we do get stuck in that.
Yeah, nos estancamos, yes.
I think we had the same conversation once. We were this exact place, and this lady came in, remember? And she's like, "Oh, you guys are very proud of being Chicano artists." And like we told her, we don't like to be called Chicano artists because it boxes us in that same category of we do the same thing.
Yeah.
And especially, for example, myself, I don't think I do the same artwork she did or some other Chicanos do. So that kind of didn't like it. So I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah. And it's also, I think, important to recognize that not everyone is Chicano either, right? Like, I don't identify as Chicano because my dad is from Mexico. I identify more as the son of an immigrant, you know, as a Mexican than I do as a Chicano. My mom, however, she grew up here. She was born in the U.S. to two, you know, immigrants from Mexico, and she identifies as Chicana. She found that as an empowering thing because of the time when she grew up, right? But that's not something that I necessarily understood from the beginning. You know, for me, as a little boy, as a baby, pues para mí, la idea de ser chicano para mí no existía. Yo simplemente era un niño mexicano, ¿verdad? Ya luego después con tiempo, cuando fui creciendo, you know, maybe like around middle school, that's when I started sort of identify with being a Chicano. But it still just didn't fit for me. I didn't feel like it was the right...
Because it has a specific size of box. That's the problem.
Exactly. And so then, cuando crecí un poco más, con tiempo y con un poco de reflexión, me empecé a identificar de otra manera. And that next label that I placed on myself when I was like about 20, 21, you know, it was more like a universalist label. You know, I started thinking of myself not as just one thing, but everything that is a part of me, from my love for hip hop to, you know, the fact that I listen to Ramon Ayala when I'm down and when I'm happy also, and to the fact that, you know, frijoles was my first food that I learned how to eat and cook and, you know, identify with, right? So I not only identify as Oaxaqueño because my grandma was from Oaxaca, and not only do I identify as Queretano because my dad is from Querétaro, you know, I also identify as American, even though I don't like to sometimes, you know, because of what that means politically. But I started to realize all of these things are all things that I've pulled from my entire human history, right? My personal history. Mi historia es algo mucho más complicado que a veces parece. And us talking about the human journey, we can't necessarily talk about the human journey without talking about how we grow up, right? Because if there's anything that is universal, it's the fact that all of us are born, all of us live, and eventually all of us die, right? No importa lo rico que sea uno, lo pobre que sea uno, you know, todos al último mueren. Kind of like a gloomy thing to say, right? Like nadie quiere hablar sobre su muerte, pero it's a fact of life. But it's the way that we live our life that really ultimately matters. And the way that we live our life, if we are reflective enough, we can start looking back at different moments in our life and say, oh, I was that when, you know, I was this age. Right? En esa etapa de mi vida, you know, I was this particular way. And if you even think about that, especially in Spanish, cuando hablamos de diferentes momentos en nuestra vida, hablamos de etapas, right? Different phases or different stages. We talk about that, if you think about that, right, like you can really literally see, like this section of my life has been this way, this section of my life has been that way, and this section of my life has been that way. Once you start reflecting on that, that's when this takes on a whole new meaning, right? Because sometimes, at least for me, I can say, I can look back on the past 36 years now of my life, and I can actually see things that happen over and over and over again. I can see behaviors. I can see emotions, right? I can see a whole lot of things that in some ways are like a trauma that I'm still trying to get over. Y no importa cuánto he cambiado, porque yo no soy el mismo niño de antes, right? I mean, I don't like to think that I am. I think I've changed. Quizá no, right? Because that's very subjective. But the more I have grown up, the more I have changed in some aspects, the more I've really stayed the same. And through my poetry, that's something that I have really started to see a lot more. So, I don't know if you guys have kind of guessed it, but today's theme is aging, right? Todos envejecemos. Y hoy les traje un poema que escribí acerca de esa experiencia que tenemos. ¿Ocho? Pues ese término de pocho viene siendo algo que es más como derogatorio que nada. It's like a person that doesn't know how to speak Spanish, doesn't know how to read, write it, is more American than Mexican or Latino. Pero esa idea de pocho es algo pues, ofensivo, al último, porque significa que uno no está muy conectado a su cultura. Yep. So, for the past 2 weeks now, I've been bringing in poems that I've written that are written in movements, right? And it's kind of funny that I bring in another one that's written in movements. Part of the reason why this one is written in movements is because I started to, again, right? I started to see a pattern. Started to see some continuity here. And I figured, I didn't really fully explain what a movement is. And so I thought, well, let's actually dedicate part of our lesson to that. Right? So, tried a ringtone. Like it. All right. So movement. Now you've seen it now 2 weeks in a row in action. Pero ¿qué significa un movimiento? When we're talking about art, not necessarily like an arts movement, like the Romantic period, the Transcendental period, like we talked about before. No ese tipo de movimiento, sino hablando de una obra de arte. Have you guys ever experienced that before? Or seen it in action? Yes? In music, right. That's actually primarily where this idea of movements comes from. Right. Now, in poetry, you can see it how I am structuring my poems lately. So you have a movement number 1, a movement number 2, movement number 3, 4, 5, however many movements you need to tell your story. But a movement in poetry is very similar to a movement in music. How many of you guys listen to classical music often, or enough to kind of hear it? How would you describe a movement, Karen, in music?
A musical thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there's definitely the theme. What else?
The climax.
There is usually some kind of climax. In poetry, it can have a climax, The climax is usually something that happens towards the end. ¿Algo más? Any other observations about it?
Commonalities within each movement.
Yeah, commonalities.
Certain motifs.
Yeah. So these are the main things that make up a movement.
La intensidad, ¿no?
Sí, como cambios de ritmo, todo eso puede ser parte de los movimientos. And that's actually one of the main reasons why you would probably write a poem in movements. So, theme, and commonalities, and this idea of climax, or we can also call it conversation with some of the other parts, some of the other movements, right? I wanted it to stand on its own. However, to make it a poem in movements, there is that need to have things that are thematic, that are going to be commonalities, right? So, and as we read this particular poem, you'll start to see what I mean. So, the theme is going to be something that's very strong throughout the entire poem. Right? So this is the whole poem. The commonalities will sometimes come across in certain things that you do. So one way that you'll see this happen in poetry with movements is that you'll have repetitions. And these repetitions, a lot of times they'll come in the form of either phrases or metaphors.
Could also be part of the rhythm of it? Like if it shares the same rhythm in certain parts?
That can, but more than anything, it would be like this. And I'll explain why it's not quite one of the commonalities. So theme, right? Eso abarca todo. Es algo, se puede decir macro, en esta ocasión. Las repeticiones normalmente serían tipo como frases o metáforas. También puede ser palabras específicas. So you might also see things that are words, specific words or word combinations that you would see over and over again. And this, if you remember when we talked about the floricanto, right? The floricanto used some of these same strategies. To write in movements is like music, ultimately. Poesías que están escritas en movimientos típicamente tienen algo de música. And that's where the rhythms and the climax actually come in. So this is where it starts to sort of emulate like a symphony. Has anybody ever actually sat through an entire symphony or listened to an entire symphony? Recorded one?
I'm sure I used to play in band a long time ago, and I'm sure we played a couple, but yeah.
Well, normally when a symphony was created, when someone like Mozart, for example, created one of his symphonies, he was creating these songs with the knowledge that they were going to be performed usually by a ballet troupe, or it was going to be part of some sort of play or something like that, right? Or an opera. Operas tell stories, no? And so you need basically the symphony to be the soundtrack to this story. So a movement, when you hear something like the Nutcracker Suite, right? In what's it called? The Swan, I can't remember the name of it. It's the Nutcracker Suite, right? Yeah, I think that's the full name of the symphony, no? But either way, right, you have these movements that are broken down with their own separate names. If it's the Nutcracker Suite, then it would be the Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy, right? And then it would be, I can't remember all of them. But, so you have these movements that are songs within a larger song. If you were to watch the play of the whole Nutcracker Suite, you would actually follow the music the entire time. There's never a pause, unless if it was intentional. Right? And so that's where movements gets this thing. So the theme in music carries on throughout the entire thing, but then there's rhythms that change and there's a climax at the end. So you might have a moment where, la música empieza todo quedito, algo sencillo, y luego sube de repente, right? And you have this sort of like clash of ideas or clash of thought processes. And then you have this section where maybe the story gets sort of sad and down, and then it'll go back up and happy, and then it'll have its climax at the very end, right? So poetry in movements sometimes has that formula where the rhythms will change, ideas will change, but the theme is the same. They're related. They can have a conversation with each other, even though they stand on their own. Does that make sense? Yeah. It sounds complicated, but ultimately it's not. Because again, you're ultimately writing to a theme. Every single movement is going to be about more or less the same thing. Maybe just told in a different way. Yes, ma'am?
Just going to say that certain concept albums in hip hop.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention too.
That apply that same,
Yeah.
that logic.
Yeah.
The whole album itself is one thing. It's like different movements every track. I think
One of my favorite albums that one of the first albums that I ever heard that used that technique of a concept album was Deltron 3030 by Del the Funky Homo Sapien and Dan the Automator. And in that one, he's Del the Funky Homo Sapien, the rapper. He's telling a story about a rapper that lives in the year 3030 and now, is traveling across the galaxy to battle other rappers and to save the world from, basically apocalypse from weird other world aliens things. It's a really cool album. It's very fun to listen to, and every song is this basic theme, and every theme that he sort of invokes within those themes, they're all interconnected somehow. So the songs will stand on their own, but it's telling a whole story. The entire album is telling a whole story.
Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah, Kendrick Lamar did that with How to Pimp a Butterfly, and there's a lot of other albums that do that too, in rock and pretty much every genre. So yeah, so movements. That's what and funny enough, right? It's called a movement, and here our theme is the human journey. Right? Yeah, so very appropriate. So with that really long intro, let's read the poem, shall we? And keep in mind that, today the idea is aging. And so as we age, the way that we interpret things. I called it graying. And the first movement is for Mami Lucy. Silver strand settles on your clavicle, cuna, de sollozos infantes y mis quejas de querer chicken nuggets instead of your enchiladas y frijoles de la olla, my love and sustenance since my first tooth broke through gums and mom memorized morning routines for my dad and me, burritos wrapped in aluminum and coffee to combine with madrugadas crawling away from home, away toward work, my journey into your arms. Number 2, Mom. Silver strand settles between tinted highlights, your attempt to hide time, blending among lessons of proper pinto bean selection, serving spoon salt portions and patience for hours passed on to me, lessons to keep me, Javi, Isa, fed, clothed, hungry for less latchkey attention and more interdependence, more palms pressed on pains, watching us wave, you came. Home from work in the window, you came, expecting. Me, not to complain, that I really wanted only to be held in your arms. 3, me then. Silver strand settles on sneaking from my left 12-year-old temple across to my 20-year-old right, to be old, to be too old to believe anymore in mom, needing my being, rather abusing my beans, boiling over because work, school, work, school, work only brought me home enough to care with my arms for my siblings and their well-being, barely believing I had a future in anyone's arms at all. My gray hair growing, my frijoles finally refined. Number 4, me now. Silver strand settles somewhere between gear shift and my Stanley coffee mug manchado por horas desveladas, driving down Central, Washington, Adams, Cesar, Jefferson, Lincoln Heights, where presidents demarcate red lines and culture is, quote, represented by Spanish names, where Beaner Brown arms built community, hoping for immunity, asylum, opportunity. Here I work, here I stay, and this stays for some as home, but for me as poetry, drizzling down my arms, subtly searching for you to hold me in yours. Number 5, you. Silver strand settles on your clavicle, cuna de hoy y mañana, un alba de poesía hirviendo entre los frijoles de olla que cocinamos, a meal suitable for this future, our future, a future, where work is poetry and my gray hair settles, now gently, in your arms. Thank you, guys. First impressions. What do you guys think?
I
Yes.
noticed the repetition of the silver strand. Did you write all of these on the same day? How long did that take?
Took me all day. This poem actually did take me longer than it normally takes me. But again, that's because every one for me has to stand alone. Right? It's part of writing and movements. That they should try to at least stand on their own most of the time. So I did have to start and stop a couple of times. Mao and then Roque.
Briefly, Concha.
You had a lot of awesome commonalities in each one. Not like you always reference the frijoles. The relationship changed every time, but they were still, how you saw it was still there. And also your desire for arms, so to be someone's arms, mothers, your grandmothers, and it was really cool. Like, a lot of motivation. Made me question how I did mine, because I don't have it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm sure yours came out just as Roque?
Just briefly, I was curious, what's your criteria for a movement to stand alone?
Kind of completes an idea or a thought. For anything to kind of stand on its own, it should feel like it completes a thought. But sometimes they bleed over, and that's okay too. I mean, these are basic, like, guidelines. They're not rules. They can be broken as much as you need it to be broken. But yeah. Karen?
I just like how it lives so. I know, it felt like very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the idea when you write a poem in movements, is that you want it to feel whole, right? So each one, again, should kind of stand on its own, but it should always try to tie back in everything as much as possible. It doesn't always happen, because ultimately, right, as we reflect on our life, not everything makes sense at the end, at whatever point we're at. And I mean, the idea in this poem in particular was to show my recognition of my aging, my progress. And the fact is that, yeah, sometimes that's all I really want, is just to be held. Because I didn't have that growing up. Not really. Especially not from my mom. Not enough. And so part of the process of of writing this poem was reliving some of the things, some of the, like I said, some of the traumas, right? Some of the things that I see have recurred in my life. Yeah, the cemetery. I had to go back to the cemetery a few times to write this, so that I could turn it into a museum, so that I could be the museum, so that I could say, I am learning from my past and how I can potentially change and redefine what it means to be loved or to give love. That is, I think, at least one of the reasons why we write, why we are always reflecting back on who we are as people through our art. It doesn't have to be always through poetry. Sometimes it's just simply journaling that we go through that process. But si ustedes son igual como yo, me imagino que cada vez que escriben algo, cada vez que practican su arte, están descubriendo algo nuevo de ustedes mismos. Any other comments or questions?
You know, since you mentioned that like you wrote it in one day, so was the aging thing, was that in your head like as a theme, or was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I knew when I sat down to write it that I wanted to write it about aging, about the process of getting older. And so for me, it came out like this, right? Reflecting on, well, what were the things that happened to me in my life that I can say over time I have grown at least a little bit, because I can't say that I'm growing, you know. Uno nunca es maestro de uno mismo, right? And so that was one thing that I knew I wanted to address, was this idea of aging. Por eso empieza cada una de las estrofas con silver strand settles. Because the silver, the idea is, you know, silver hair. That's something that people point out on me all the time. How much gray hair. But other things too, like the reason why frijoles came up in every single one was because, like I said earlier, it was one of the first foods that I remember actually really enjoying, being one of my favorites. My Mami Lucy used to make amazing frijoles, and that is my connection to her. You know, my mom, she taught me how to make food. Right? My mom was the one that taught me how to cook, and my mom obviously learned from my grandma. So ahí está la conexión. You know, it's a generational thing. So that's my connection to my ancestors. So that was a very conscious thing that I knew I wanted to incorporate too. And then as I was writing it, that's when I started to discover through that reflection that, yeah, it's always been about being held. The safety, the security of being held. That's something that I've always missed. So, yo sé que es...
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, the first part, it kind of did, it did throw me off, like, because you talk about Mami Lucy, and you're like, oh, your mom. And then you're like, oh, wait, mom? So it's like, oh, Mami Lucy, which makes you think like a grandma. And I think that was, I don't know if it was on purpose, but it does throw like a curveball to keep you like interested. Yeah.
Well, that's good. I think of that. I appreciate that feedback.
Was that your mom? Mommy Lucy?
Mami Lucy is my grandma.
Oh, okay.
That's what I called her.
So if I understand correctly, it was that you wished for your mother's love or affection or time. And did she take you to your grandma to take care of you? So your grandma was like your mom because she was doing the job that you wished your mom was doing.
Exactly.
And then you try to find this love as an adult, and you found it in poetry.
Yep.
But because I see a lot of feminine, but I don't hear that, I don't
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, not in this poem. Yeah, that's just the route that it took.
So there are another, I guess, motifs or metaphors that we didn't discuss that are also present that you intentionally wrote?
No, those were the main ones. You know, I tried to keep it as simple as I could, in a way, just so that it felt tight and cohesive. This, you know how last week I told you guys that I really struggled and I kept starting and stopping, and so it sounded disjointed. This time I stopped only because I had to leave, you know. If not, I would have probably sat down and written it like in one session. But yeah, so I had that train of thought, like that clarity for me, and knowing what I wanted to incorporate was something that did help. Y para la tarea esta semana, aquí tienen su reto. Quiero que escriban un poema usando movimientos. But in order for you to do the homework, you know, and to write a poem in movements, my suggestion for you is to think of theme, right? Number one. And this week the theme is aging. You know, we all age, like I said, and we can easily reflect back on our individual lives if we reflect back on how we've aged. So your theme is going to be aging, but what is a phrase that you could incorporate in every single one of your movements? Igual como yo usé silver strand settles. You know, that was my way of repeating a motif, of repeating the idea of aging in every single one. And so, what is something that would represent that for you? Cada familia tiene sus dichos, ¿no? Me imagino. If that's something that helps you get started, make a list. Make a list of sayings or phrases that you've heard your parents say that you find yourself saying, or that, you know, your grandparents may have said that you heard your parents then say. Yeah, Mauricio's already inspired.
And it causes so much range of emotions.
Yeah.
Frustration, hope, hate.
Yeah. But that would be my suggestion on how to get started.
So it doesn't have to be connected to our parents, right?
Not necessarily, no. But, you know, your life, right? What is something that has recurred in your life that you can recognize as recurred?
Hairy legs.
Hairy legs?
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. You'll kind of see, like, once you start reflecting back on different stages in your life, that there are things that you probably have experienced over and over and over again. Things that shape your worldview.
You can play around with where the phrases and the movements, right?
Yeah. But, you know, it's going to be there in one form or another.
So do you write 5?
Doesn't have to be 5. But, I mean, if you get to 5, that'd be good. If you've experienced that much in your life to where you could write 5 or more. Good, I guess? I don't know. It's like a good with a question mark. Any questions? Any other? No? All right. Well, I guess that's it then.